Good morning, good people. Well, it's a good morning for everyone. Rashee Rice on the roster, of course. And we obviously made a big push to push you guys to draft Rashee Rice. So a lot of people in my audience, I'm painful morning, all right? And we are going live a little bit earlier than we typically do. It is 10:30 a.m. Monday morning, and we usually don't go live till about noon. But I got up early. We got ready. We got prepared. We got everything going. So now you have two Monday Night Football games tonight. We've got Miami versus Tennessee. And listen, I know that the Miami Dolphins. Did my mic just unplug? Check, check, check. No, we bike. How did that even happen? I know that the Miami Dolphins offense is struggling right now, but all Tyreek Hill has to do is have one receiving yard. All right, if he has 1 yard, if he has one single yard, you're a winner on Underdog Fantasy. So just go do yourself a favor. If you lost Rashee Rice, here's a way to pick up an easy win. If you're a first-time depositor on Underdog Fantasy, go download the app. Link is in the description. Use our code BDGE, as always. And that'll get you a deposit bonus. That'll get you access to the Big Dog membership, which has our rankings for free for the rest of the year. And that'll get you this free square, and you'll get back on thy leaderboard, all right? Every Monday, we go live to talk game-by-game recaps, everything big fantasy takeaways, the winners, the losers, the injuries, and those have been plentiful and bountiful and just absolutely scorching the landscape at this point, all right? So I won't waste anyone else's time here. We're going to jump into the games, as we always do. Important to note, we've got, I believe, two teams on bye next week. We have Philly, and we have, let's see, week 5 starts the byes. We got 4 teams. We got Philly, LA Chargers, the Lions, and the Titans. So we've got a pretty significant number of fantasy players. So it is important to start preparing for that, okay? The byes are upon us. Thursday Night Football was upon us on Thursday. Good stuff, Nick. The brain be working this morning. Dallas wins 20-15. In terms of fantasy takeaways, nothing major from the Dallas side. Jake Ferguson, good to see him back and rumbling in PPR league, 7 for 49. Good to see. In terms of the backfield, though, we are starting to see Rico get more involved. It's not really his snap count getting super duper duper increased. It's more like Zeke is a little bit getting faded out. Rico goes 11 for 46. He does catch a touchdown pass, 1 for 15 through the air. But if we go over to Fantasy Life and we look at how the splits are actually starting to get divvied up here, can we see that? Let's see. Let's make it a little bit smaller for you guys so you can see the whole screen. Damn, I can't figure out how to put this on the left side. What are we doing? Okay, so Rico Dowdle, his snaps have stayed like exactly the same pretty much for the first 4 weeks. You are seeing the rush attempt numbers start to move up a little bit, but his routes have stayed consistent. His targets have stayed relatively consistent, but you're seeing Zeke start to kind of just taper off. 50% of the snaps in week 1, down to 39, down to 20, down to 18. So we are seeing like a decrease in certain aspects. That's not what I wanted to do there. We are seeing a decrease in certain aspects from Zeke, and it's coming at the cost of pretty much any production that he has. So you can drop Zeke for sure. You can drop Zeke from your fantasy lineups and maybe start Rico. I don't know that I feel like super good about him right now, just given the fact that like he doesn't really make explosive plays. This offense has not had a lot of success on the ground regardless of who is getting the balls here. Hunter Lupke is getting a little bit more involved. So, yeah, Zeke is not great right now. That's kind of the only takeaway here from the Cowboy side of things. It was a bad game for Devin Singletary. He had his first kind of like dud game. Malik Neighbors continues to be the GOAT. He's, I believe, the wide receiver 1 still through 4 weeks right now. Wan'Dale Robinson continues to be a great PPR scam. 14 targets in this game is insane, but 11 for 71, so you got 18 out of him if you start him. Again, I think you can start him weekly in PPR leagues. I probably wouldn't be looking for him in other types of scoring settings, though. If we move on to the GOAT Falcons, 26-24, somehow we, like, somehow we pulled this game out without scoring an offensive touchdown, but shout out to us. Derek Carr and the Saints have completely come back down to earth. They're a really consolidated offense right now. Every target pretty much goes to Olave, Shaheed, and Kamara. And you could start all three of those guys with relative confidence. It was good to see Shaheed get 11 targets in this one, 8 for 83, and not only succeed via the passing game. Or not only succeed via the deep passing game, sorry. I actually just want to check the stream to make sure that we are working right now, and the chat is booming, and yeah, there we go. So it was good to see Shaheed work underneath. It was good to see him get like some possession targets so that we feel a little bit more comfortable about him going forward in that role, and we're not just banking on like a 70-yard touchdown pass. So Shaheed's like a nice wide receiver 3 going forward for sure. You have Kamara, 19 for 77, another 26 touches in this one, just a high-end RB1 at the moment. Taysom Hill was getting a little bit too comfortable if you were a Alvin Kamara owner there. He ended up scoring both of the original 2 goal line touchdowns. He was just getting carries from like under center, and then he got hurt. So he left, and I don't know how serious the injury is, but he left, and then Kamara scores his touchdown, but nothing really to take away there. On the flip side, dude, like Bijan Robinson, man, he has been so disappointing. Definitely not worth the draft capital that you spent on him in fantasy drafts earlier on. It just feels like he never has those like big games. He very rarely has like 20 carry, 25 carry type games, and it's capping his ceiling. Like, they don't have enough goal line carries going around in this offense, and they get him involved in the passing game. Like, he continues to go, 4 for 46 and 3 for 35 and 5 for 45 or whatever, and it's allowed him to have a floor. But when you have games where like Algier goes 8 for 60 and they ride the hot hand, that becomes a problem. This offense, it's still out of sync, and I think that it's still early on in the season where there's so many moving parts, right? The new quarterback, the new offensive scheme, like everything is still new here, and I still think there's going to take time to develop into it, because when you look at the schedule, like, it's a tough schedule to start. You get the Bucs next week, which is not too tough. You get the Panthers. Down the stretch, though, like, things get a little bit easier, where you start to play against the Vikings, Raiders, Giants, Commanders towards the end of the schedule. And I think that's where we're really going to start to see like any of the fantasy investment that we made into this team really pay off. Obviously, that's a long way away, but there is brighter days on the horizon if you invested into the Atlanta team. You're obviously starting Bijan every single week, but like, I was looking at the numbers this morning, and right now, Zach Moss is averaging more PPR fantasy points per game than Bijan Robinson is. So it's not pretty out there for Bijan owners. And if you own him, you know that. Like, he's not giving you any sort of like upside games here. So it's not great right now for Bijan. Drake London continues to kind of get home if you're a PPR guy. Darnell Mooney continues to be a relatively good start. He's getting a lot of options, or he's getting a lot of targets. He's getting a lot of opportunity in this offense. They keep chucking. It's crazy, right? We invest 3 straight years of top 10 picks in skill players, and then when everything matters the most, we want to lean on Darnell Mooney to win us the game. It is what it is. Mooney's been like a decent wide receiver 3, though, for PPR leagues. And then Kyle Pitts, like, he's just the whoa. I don't know what else to tell people this. Like, you need to stop being convinced by the fantasy community that he's going to be good. He's just not. He's not a game changer in any sense of the word. Like, he looks kind of athletic sometimes. Cool. Great fucking story. We're done with Kyle Pitts here. We are done with Kyle Pitts. Bears and the Rams. This was a pretty sloppy game. The Bears did come away with the victory, 24-18. Much more of a product of the Rams just having a really bad defense. This was, the week that DeAndre Swift finally bounced back. Everyone sat him, including myself. Like, if I owned him anywhere, I was not playing him. And then naturally he goes 16 for 93 and a touchdown on the ground, 7 for 72 on the ground. Roschon Johnson does get in. He was kind of like a popular, was there going to be a flip inning happening there in the backfield? So you could have done worse than Roschon if you ended up starting him. But DeAndre Swift, is good to see the bounce back. But, like, I do not predict these kind of numbers going forward. I do not predict anything more than still, like, you're questioning whether or not you want to have him in your flex going forward, because they're not going to be playing against the Rams every single week. I should also say, in the Falcons game, we lost Troy Anderson, who leads our team in tackles, which is a big hit to our run defense. because our run defense has been really stout up to this point. And if he's out, for even if it's a couple weeks, that's going to be a significant downgrade to us and a significant upgrade to the opposing runners. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I'll try to obviously stay on top of all the injuries that happen with every team, whether they're in the trenches or they're actual skill players, because I do think having knowledge of the injuries that are in the trenches and the lesser-known players is one of the bigger advantages you can have in fantasy football, and especially like betting if you're someone that takes a lot of lines and just like straight-up spreads and stuff like that. It's something I really, really try hard to stay on top of throughout the week. For the Rams, bad day for Stafford. That was, predictable. The Chicago Bears defense is very, very, very legit. Kyren Williams comes away with another great game. For those of y'all that faded him because he was a punt returner, shout out to you. Blake Corum is easily droppable at this point. Doesn't even look like he is going to be the handcuff if something were to happen to Kyren Williams. If we go to Fantasy Life and check this out, the running back splits here, Blake Corum is not even playing. He hasn't taken a snap since week 2. That feels a little bit problematic for him wasting a roster spot for you, okay? You're seeing Kyren obviously dominate touches, dominate snaps, running all the routes, getting all the inside the 5. Look at this. Inside the 5 attempts for the Rams. It's good to life is good when you have Kyren Williams and you're seeing hundreds down the board here. So he's in on every 2 and 4 minute drill. He's in on the long down and distance. He is the clear workhorse that we expected him to be in the offseason. And if you want to check out these numbers by yourself, you ever want to look through like any of the teams, you wanted to look through any of the positions, whatever, you want to look through team schemes, you want to see how much, did the Saints stop using play action as much? Is that why they are struggling now as opposed to week 1 and 2? Shift motion still at a relatively high rate. The personnel packages are still relatively the same. So that doesn't seem to be the problem there. Maybe it was a skill issue. Maybe they were just going against really bad defenses at the time. Regardless, this is the Fantasy Life website. So fantasylife.com has the utilization report, which is what we're using right now. It is a phenomenal resource and probably one of, if not the best in fantasy right now. So if you want to go purchase that for yourself, it's like the easiest way to stay on top of all players and snaps and make sit-start decisions. Go over to Fantasy Life, and if you want to purchase the package, which, I would recommend this at full price, but they also gave us a 20% off discount. So, again, promo code BDGE over there. If you want to get a year's worth of it, you'll have this all the way until, like, October of next year. For I think it's like $100, 20% off. So you got $80 for literally the best resource in fantasy football right now, in my humble ass but never incorrect opinion. What else do we want to make of here? So, I've been kind of beating this drum. I was high on Tutu Atwell as a Rams pickup, and he has been the best player in the Rams receiving group consistently week over week since Puka and Cooper Kupp have been out. So he continues to be a dude that I think you could flex, because when they're taking deep shots, it is to Tutu. Jordan Whittington was a dude that had kind of fallen down the depth chart, but Tyler Johnson's completely off the board. Demarcus Robinson, was never built to be a wide receiver 1, so he was kind of falling down the pecking order as well. Whittington's becoming, like, he's kind of running that Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua role, and I think it's going to be a really inconsistent experience, and I don't feel like I'm comfortable starting him. But if he continues to see an uptick in snaps, let's actually look at the Rams receiving room. DeMarcus is still hovering around 90, Tutu a full-time player. Tyler Johnson took a huge hit, though, going from 48 down to 13 this week as Jordan Whittington jumped up to 97% of the snaps, a 26% target per route run rate, 30% of the targets. That's pretty telling. 29% of the air yards. That's actually a little bit more positive than I thought it was going to be. So, to be honest with you, I think Whittington needs to be a priority target on the waiver wire. He seems like someone, if he does take over, like Tutu's more of an outside guy and a field stretcher. DeMarcus Robinson's also a field stretcher. And the dudes that succeed in this offense are the Pukas, the Cooper Kupps, the ones that find the holes in the zones in the weak spots there on the defense. So I think Whittington could be a really solid PPR play. Obviously, tomorrow I'll put out a more in-depth, like well-researched waiver wire video for you guys, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you like these recaps, obviously subscribe to the channel. Every Monday we'll be doing them. On the flip side, Swift obviously had his breakout game. The receiving group, man, it's sloppy out there, and I just don't think you can't really trust it. Like, obviously after last week, we kind of were just saying Caleb's big game was extremely fluky given the fact that he threw it 52 times. Now we're seeing a 60 5% drop off in terms of volume, like, yeah, that's what's going to happen here. I will say it was probably one of his like better outings just from like an efficiency standpoint, even though the volume wasn't there. He's missing so many easy throws, which like didn't happen in college. He's such a good playmaker, but the level of throws that he just continues to miss when his receivers are open it's weird, man. I don't really know what to make of it right now, because you're obviously not going to give up on, you know, the number 1 overall pick within 4 weeks and start making like these rash fucking takes about him. But there's something obviously very off with the Chicago Bears passing offense. I don't know if it's just strictly coaching, because some of it has to do, like, Caleb's got dudes open down the field and just continues to miss them. So it's obviously not really startable in fantasy at the moment. I would still start DJ Moore. Rome was obviously such a flop this week. Keenan Allen didn't play well either, and this was a good matchup against the Rams. They get the Panthers and then the Jaguars and the Commander. Holy shit, that is some fucking lineup right now of teams they have over the next month. So that being said, looking at the schedule, if you want to go buy low on a DJ Moore, if you want to go buy low on one of the receivers, this might be the time to do it, because they get Carolina, Jacksonville, Washington, and Arizona. Holy macarolis. Vikings, Packers. So the Vikings just started to beat the shit out of the Packers, 28-0 by the second quarter. This was Jordan Love's first game back, and I will say, man, if you have Jordan Love, if you have any of the weapons attached to Jordan Love right now, I would be so fucking happy waking up this morning, dude. He looked a little sloppy at times. He was obviously a little bit immobile, but for him to kind of, I don't want to say he lucked his way into, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. He looked bad. Like, normally in an outing this bad where you perform this poorly, you're gonna end up with a bad fantasy performance. But because Minnesota's offense was so fucking good, it forced him to throw the ball, 54 times on this one. So Jordan Love, I feel like, walked away lucky fantasy-wise, but he's going to continue to get healthier. And I honestly, so injury-wise, Christian Watson suffered a high ankle sprain. What I heard this morning is that he is likely going on the IR. So he's going to miss, if he doesn't end up on the IR, probably still somewhere from like 3 up to 4 or 5 weeks. And he's a dude that just always deals with injuries. At this point, he's whatever. I think he had proven this year that he was probably the worst receiver of the big 4 that they have there. Jaden Reed is an absolute fucking stud, certifiable, like, must start every week. Dontavian Wicks stepped up, 13 targets in this one, 5 for 78, 2 touchdowns. He continues to just drop a lot of passes. Like, he kind of got like some nub hands going on, but like when he makes big plays, the motherfucker makes big plays. Tucker Kraft was the dude that I've kind of been hyping up for the last couple of weeks and told y'all to stash him. 9 targets, 6 catches, 53 yards, and a touchdown. Romeo Doubs also had 8 targets, 4 for 39. He was kind of like the man that was left out there. I will say this. I am comfortable starting every one of those top 4 dudes going forward with a more condensed target tree with Christian Watson out. Jaden Reed's obviously a must-start. Dontavian Wicks is probably about to fucking pop off now as a damn near full-time player. Romeo Doubs will be a full-time player, and he'll have much better games going forward. And then Tucker Kraft is clearly the tight end 1 in this offense and looks a million times better than Luke Musgrave has ever looked. So I think Tucker Kraft is a borderline tight end 1. I think Jaden Reed is a wide receiver 1. I think Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs are both like low-end wide receiver 2. Wicks has more upside. Doubs probably has realistically a safer floor going forward, but they're both, all 3 of those dudes, if they're on your waiver wire, need to be picked up this week. I also think Josh Jacobs in the backfield, 9 for 51, another kind of like disappointing performance, but he does catch 4 passes. Emmanuel Wilson is kind of taken over the role that we imagined Marshawn Lloyd would have, while Marshawn Lloyd is obviously out right now. I will say for Jacobs, though, he played well, 5.7 yards per carry. The game script just did not go in his favor, but he will have much better days ahead. I think he's without a doubt a buy low right now. He should have scored a touchdown yesterday. They got on like the half-inch line. LaFleur came out screaming about how it should have been. Also, another one like Romeo Doubs, really close to having that touchdown, got tackled like in the end zone, but didn't get control of the ball until he fell forward onto the half-yard line. So I think you can make the case that like we should probably be looking at both of those guys, Jacobs and Doubs, as higher value players, but they're not, because neither of them ended up getting that touchdown because LaFleur came out yelling, got a personal foul, they moved back 15 yards, whatever. Would buy low on Josh Jacobs, would pick up and play any of those Packers weapons at the moment. Darnold continues his hot streak. Aaron Jones continues to be an RB1. Jordan Addison continues to make me look like a dickhead. I've been talking about every single recap, every single week. I'm like, dude, it's killing me that Jalen Nailor is doing so well, because all those targets are going to be Addison's, and Addison's going to be the GOAT when he comes back in. first week back active, I was like, I can't trust him. He's missed multiple weeks with this ankle injury, so I played Jawan Jennings over Jordan Addison. Jawan ended up like being okay. I think he scored 11 or 12 PPR fantasy points, but Addison looked great, man. 3 for 72 and a touchdown. He also ran a touchdown in, so he went off and popped, and now you can feel pretty comfortable about starting Addison every single week. Next week, the London games start back up, so it's Minnesota versus Green Bay, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is miserable because I actually have in your idiot league mates, the league that we have, within the office, I have Rodgers and Darnold, I have Addison and Breece Hall, so I'm gonna have 4 players going in that 9:30 a.m. game. I hate that. Those games are always sloppy. Those offenses are never prepared. They're always terrible. Like the time travel kills them, and it's killing me inside that I have to play all 4 of those guys. But I will say for matchups next week, assuming that Sauce travels with Jefferson, that probably opens things up more for Addison. So I feel like really confident about Addison being in my lineup. Moving on to the Colts and the Steelers. All right, so here's the deal with the Steelers right now. Najee obviously looked like the coniest of the cones that he's ever looked like. He is full on directing traffic at this point. The Steelers' offensive line, though, they are in hell right now. And this is a tweet I'll just kind of throw up if you guys can see this, hopefully. That might be too fucking bright. Come on. Sorry. You know what? That was such a novice move by me not putting that in dark mode before showing you guys that. Yeah, I'm a psycho, and I like looking at Twitter and when it's white. I'll get here. I promise. I'll get home here. Wow, that was much easier. So this is the beat reporter from Pittsburgh that I actually had on the channel this summer. Nate Herbig out for the season. Troy Fautanu out for the season. James Daniels just got injured yesterday, out for the season. Dylan Cook on IR. Isaiah Ximala missed first 4 weeks. So they are like almost in as bad of a spot as like the Patriots offensive line is right now, where you got to focus back on it. You got to grow up. Where it's like, we're not going to focus? Okay, you guys don't need to focus on me anyways. Doesn't matter. Just listen to me. Yeah, they're in really bad shape right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers and their offensive line, which has led to obviously super inefficient running games, and it's probably a lot of the reason why we saw Justin Fields now having to scramble a ton, because Justin Fields popped off 10 for 55, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He has become their best like goal line inside the 10 red zone option. And with this offensive line, it is in the shambled up version of themselves right now. I'd imagine that's going to have to continue going forward. But Fields look good, dude. 312, 9.2 yards per attempt and a touchdown. Obviously, 2 touchdowns on the ground. So that's the massive fantasy day that we've been kind of waiting for Justin Fields. Cordarrelle Patterson looked a million times better than Najee, obviously. 6 for 43. 7.2 yards per carry. He got hurt, though, fucked up his ankle a little bit, so that's something to monitor. Jaylen Warren was out for this game. Some dude, okay, Aaron Shampkin, that's the name. I was going to say, there was like a backup running back that came in that no one in the office had any idea who the fuck it was. Aaron Shampkin. Yeah, no, don't pick up Aaron Shampkin. Pittsburgh receivers, Pickens had a big game, 7 for 113. Could have had a better day. I'm sure you guys were watching Red Zone, but like he made a catch inside the 5 and like basically gave it away to the Colts, fumbled it. Was inside the it was weird. It was weird. But love to see that big game. If Justin Fields continues to open it up a little bit more, Pickens will continue to have really, really big games. The problem is they just don't throw a lot of passing touchdowns, and more often than not, Fields is probably only going to throw the ball sub 30 times. So it's like, sure, Pickens could have his boom games, but more often than not, he's kind of in that like wide receiver 18 to 24 range. Really good player. He's like a better player than his fantasy days will give you, unfortunately. On the flip side, we do have a couple of injuries that we have to go over. All right, this is actually starting to piss me off. We got to dial back in. Hey, how you doing? So Anthony Richardson takes a big hit on the hip, is dealing with a hip pointer injury. From everything I've heard, it's non-serious. It's possible that he misses a week. It is more of like a pain tolerance thing right now. He came out. He wasn't sure of whether or not he would play next week. I don't think we've gotten any real concrete word, but it's not a long-term concern, apparently, from what I've gathered thus far. Joe Flacco came in and just did what Joe Flacco does and just dominates, bro. 16 for 26, 168 through the air, and 2 touchdowns to add to pad the career stats. You kind of love to see it. Now, JT, this is unfortunate. 21 for 88, big game, a touchdown. He ends up suffering a high ankle sprain. Now, there are a few ways to look at this. This is obviously, it's never a good thing, of course. But there are a lot of people, in fantasy now that don't really put context behind injuries. And following, like, the doctors that do this shit, that really do this shit. Dr. Jesse Morse, one of the best doctors in the space when it comes to covering these injuries. A lot of people don't like him on Twitter. He gets a lot of negative interaction his way. In my opinion, I follow a lot of the Twitter doctors. He is by far and away the best one out there. Most accurate. Sure, he's gotten things wrong over the years. Without a doubt, he is the number one follow for this stuff. A lot of the dudes out there, and again, I respect their opinion. I like getting different angles. They're PTs. They are not. Dr. Morse works with professional athletes. He is an actual surgeon for them. He's an actual doctor for them. He has had way more hands-on experience with these types of injuries and all this stuff. And he made a really interesting point on his recap of the injuries this week. So this was the same ankle that JT suffered the high ankle sprain on 2 years ago in 2022 that really derailed his season. However, he had surgery on it. And because he had surgery, the tightrope surgery, they put something in his ankle that actually was something that probably helps him out in this situation. I think it was a rod. I don't remember the exact terminology he was using, but he was saying because he had that surgery, this will not be as significant of an impact as most people are probably making it out to be. So it's not to say JT is going to play next week, but Dr. Morse said he leans more towards this being like a Joe Mixon type injury where, you'll probably still have to miss 2 weeks or so, but he is not super pessimistic about it, which gives me a little bit more confidence if I'm a JT owner. Obviously, never good to fucking suffer a high ankle sprain or anything like that, but if I could sprinkle a little positivity on that ass, that's what we're going to do here. Pause. Anthony Richardson. Moving down to the pass catchers. Josh Downs, man, kills me. I love Josh Downs. One of my favorite players, like, in the league, straight up. He's one of my highest owned players in best ball drafts from the summer, doing all those underdog drafts. And then the team I drafted him on, the Your Idiot League Mates team, also had A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, T. Higgins, Jordan Addison. So at this point, I'm like, I got 5. All of my wide receivers are hurt. Who was like the odd man out there? It had to be Josh Downs. So I actually dropped him. Someone else picked him up, and now they're getting to enjoy what I should have fucking enjoyed. I basically got this nice fat ice cream cone, and it dropped off my cone, and someone just picked it up with their hand and fucking ate it. And I respect it. I do. 8 for 82 and a touchdown. Ties Michael Pittman with the 9 targets on the day. Pittman, massive bounce back game. 6 for 113. And you know what's kind of funny? I think I'm going to start doing this weekly. I made a slip on Underdog. Let me move myself over here. Which was it was basically, I called it the all fade slip. So all the narratives that were going around for the week about all these guys that stink and all these guys that you need to fade and sit, whatever. And I was saying the same shit. Like, I wasn't starting DeAndre Swift. I wasn't starting Michael Pittman in most cases, whatever. I basically took the narratives because I'm like, everyone's always wrong all the time. So I was like, I'm just going to take the over on all the guys that everybody says is terrible. And I hit 3 of 4, but we flexed it, so we ended up winning. But I took DeAndre Swift's over. I took Travis Kelce's over. I took Garrett Wilson's over, who was fucking close. I didn't realize the weather was about to eat that game up like that. And then I took Michael Pittman's over. So we smashed on 3 of the 4. And this is on Pickett. So if any of you guys want to follow all of my bets throughout the week, you could do so on Pickett. I don't know if you guys can see this. Yeah. Pickett.com, they have the desktop, which is like a pro version, but the app is free. So if you go download the Pickett app, you'll be able to see all of my bets. You'll be able to track all of your bets as well. So if you're someone who gambles on, Underdog, but also does like Prize Picks or ESPN Bet or MGM or FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever, this actually allows you to sync all of your books together. And And you could track it over time, a week, a month, whatever. And it's like a social app as well. So you could follow myself. You could follow all the dudes in the office. You could follow anyone you want, any creators that are also on the app. So Pickett is dope. So go download the Pickett app. And I think it'll ask you where you came from. And you could throw our code in there. But it's free. You don't have to pay. You don't have to deposit anything. No credit card needed. Just a super, super cool resource and app if you want to trail and or fade anything that I do and say. What else do we got going forward? Oh, yeah. If JT misses time, it looks like Trey Sermon will probably be the guy that gets in there. I believe Tyler Goodson's kind of like the pass-catching back. Let's just confirm that via Fantasy Life. The Colts running backs here. Trey Sermon, 25%. Tyler Goodson with a fat 2% of snaps. Yeah, I mean, Trey Sermon will definitely be the guy that I think takes the JT role. And I guess the running backs aren't really getting a ton of dump-offs. We will have to, if JT or if Anthony Richardson misses time, we know that Joe Flacco dumps off to running backs at a very high rate. So that will also play a factor into whether or not I think Tyler Goodson could be a pickup, whether or not Trey Sermon will play. But it is good to see here, if you see on the right side, long down and distance snaps, that's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, stuff like that, that Trey Sermon saw 62% of those snaps. So maybe they do feel comfortable with him in that role. So Trey Sermon would be a pretty good pickup for the time being. We saw what Zach Moss did in that time frame last year when JT was not playing. So could do worse. Broncos Jets, this is just disgusting. This game might have been the worst game of all time. Bo Nix somehow has 60 passing yards on 25 pass attempts. You look at the box scores of the receivers. Courtland Sutton had all 60 receiving yards. The rest of the team had 0 yards combined. We have 3-3, -2, -4. This is one of the more unique box scores you will ever see in the history of an NFL game. Tyler Bidet, which was a popular kind of stash this week, ended up getting stashed onto a stretcher and taken away after a hit that pretty much, it put him out for a minute. Javonte Williams, nice little bounce back, 16 for 77. Jaleel, 9 for 46. The problem is you just can't start anyone in this in this entire offense. Maybe Courtland Sutton. I still feel he's clearly taken over as the number one target. 9 targets on 25 pass attempts, huge target share. Most of them are just not valuable, but you could definitely do worse than Courtland Sutton here in these bye weeks as a flex guy. On the other side, nothing worked for Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. This team is in shambles right now. I don't want to put too heavy of a stock into this because the Broncos defense is so far outperforming what I thought they would be. They have been incredible, and the weather yesterday was miserable. We saw a lot of people slipping. We saw a lot of receptions kind of go off receivers' hands that don't normally happen. Happened to Breece Hall quite a few times. And on that note, I mean, anyone who's got fucking eyeballs, something looks off with Breece, dude. He doesn't, and this is not just this game. And I have him in my big league, and he's been good for fantasy the first 3 weeks, right? 18 points, 20 points, whatever. But even when you're watching him, you're thank God he got into the end zone. But I have not seen any explosiveness out of him. He's just been an average. He looks very average this year. He looks like he's been a super average back that's getting a lot of volume and a lot of volume in the right spots. I don't know how long we can keep that up for. Braylon Allen is simply playing too well to keep him off the field. And yesterday they had that one drive at the goal line where they were on the 1 yard line, fed it to Breece, he got stuffed. Next play, fed it to Breece, he got stuffed. You have to think that it's only a matter of time before Breece loses that goal line roll to Braylon Allen. It is not a good trajectory for Breece right now. Now, obviously, his profile and his athleticism should be able to get him there, but we're just not seeing any sort of explosion out of him like we had last year. Last year, he was 8 months removed from the ACL, and he's breaking off 70-yard plays. This year, the dude can't get more than 4 yards a pop. It's really bad. So I'm going to be honest. I've kind of been sending out offers trying to move Breece Hall. One offer I sent out this morning and actually is kind of accepted in place as long as Jared Goff doesn't get hurt in Monday Night Football. It's Superflex League. I'm trying to move off of Breece Hall for someone in if Breece Hall can still be looked at as Breece Hall, you can downgrade, I think, to a running back that's in the next tier or 2 tiers down or whatever, and then upgrade another position. So what I'm trying to do is, and you guys tell me how much you hate this trade, I'm trying to move off Breece Hall, because one of the other things you want to try to do as well is like not necessarily overthink the player, but we start to have a pretty good picture of teams. It's clear to me that the New York Jets are just not going to be like a very high scoring, a high tempo offense. So the trade that I have in place right now is Breece and Jared Goff. Jared Goff's been an absolute dud for me for Superflex, for Josh Jacobs and Anthony Richardson. Now, people are pretty off of Anthony Richardson right now. 6 interceptions, and now he's hurt and banged up. And Josh Jacobs feels like a little bit of a buy low to me. But Jacobs is a dude where, like Richardson, I need some upside at QB. I need some like week winning type upside at QB, and I still think Richardson has that. So I'm not like freaking out with the first couple weeks of the season. Richardson's still a buy for me, and like I said, I don't think the injury's that serious. When it comes to Jacobs, again, I think he's a buy low right now. I want to attach myself to this Jordan Love Green Bay Packers offense, like really, really badly. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about Breece if I'm a Breece owner, because it's only a matter of time before this backfield gets like too tricky, where it's like Braylon Allen, sure, he's still the 2, and Breece Hall is still dominating the snaps and probably getting more carries. But like, if Allen takes over that goal line role, it is a huge problem for Breece, and I think you probably want to try to get ahead of that sooner rather than later. So just to give you an example of the things that I'm looking to do right now. Of course, it's a risk. What if next week Breece goes out and rips an 80-yard touchdown and Anthony Richardson gets a concussion and gets hurt or whatever? Sure, I could be in fucking shambles. But like, you got to do what you got to do. It's desperation times out here in fantasy, man. From the pass catching group, sure, Mike Will, Alan Lazard, kind of usable for PPR, I guess. Wilson gets shadowed by Patrick Surtain. Drink, what else is new? Are you worried about Garrett? Of course. Like, how can you not? He's literally just slant boy. Like, we're 4 weeks into the season, and sure, you could just keep saying he's getting all these tough cornerbacks. And yeah, he'll have good games, of course. Like, I'm sure he'll have, an 8 for 100 and a touchdown game soon, because Garrett Wilson is way too good of a player to get held down. But if he just keeps getting held down by every good cornerback, then yeah, we have a bigger issue at hand here. All right, so that's also the way you got to be looking at Garrett Wilson. Like, not every cornerback is a shutdown Deion Sanders type of motherfucker out here, okay? Sometimes if you're good enough at wide receiver, you got to beat the good cornerbacks, and Garrett Wilson just isn't doing that right now. Keep on moving down. Philly gets their ass whooped by Tampa Bay. Now, I will say, nothing actually really to take away from the Philly game here. They have their bye next week, so by the time they get back from the bye, they should have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith back. They're down their 2 best wide receivers, and they're only 2 good wide receivers. They're down their best offensive lineman and Lane Johnson. I wasn't really expecting much here, so nothing really to take away from Philly. I expect a lot better play going forward after the bye week. On the flip side, Baker continues to dominate. Evans gets home. Chris Godwin has a good day, but doesn't get in the end zone, so it doesn't feel like a Chris Godwin day, the one that we've really been like accustomed to this year so far. I will say, in the backfield, it was a split, and both running backs look good. Rachaad White finally busted off a couple big runs, 10 for 49. Bucky also goes 10 for 49. Rachaad White goes 2 for 35 through the air. Bucky goes 1 for 6. Now, the interesting part here is, and we'll see this in the stats, is Bucky ended up getting like all of the valuable inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line type of plays. So Bucky, inside the 5 attempts, 60% of them yesterday. I would assume that would just mean that would be 3 out of 5. So 3 out of the 5 carries inside the 5 went to Bucky Irving. That would probably mean that the other, I know Baker had a rushing score, so it probably went that way. But if he starts to take over the goal line role, like we saw him get a season high in snaps here, 41%. His rush attempts are still hovering around 40%, but the routes run, 35%. That's a nice little increase for him. If he starts getting the inside the 5 goal line carries, I think we're just in a tough spot right now. I don't really ever see a spot where Bucky becomes, a 65% snap guy. I think they're heading towards a 50-50, which makes it difficult to play either one of them. I think right now they're both like RB3 options. I think like Rachaad White will give you 9-10 PPR points per game. Bucky probably has a higher ceiling at this point if he gets the goal line work, but he probably has a lower floor. So if he doesn't bust off, 14, 22-yard runs like he's been doing, and he doesn't score a goal line touchdown, then you're probably looking at, a 5-6 point floor So they're both like, until one of them gets injured or there's like a clear changing of the guard, they're both kind of risky plays right now that you got to be a little bit desperate to throw into your lineups. Bengals and Carolina. The Bengals get their first win, 34-24. Joe Burrow looks pretty good in this one. Jamar Chase, 3 for 85, makes a ridiculous 63-yard touchdown catch, just breaking dudes off as he's running down the field. T. Higgins, good to see him back, leading the team in targets. 10 targets on 31 pass attempts, 6 for 60. No big plays. You could see 6 catches. His longest reception was 12 yards. Probably had a couple end zone targets there that maybe could have converted, but better days ahead for T. Higgins. Good to see him just like back healthy, running all the routes and stuff like that. So you probably got yourself a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 going forward with T. The backfield is obviously the most interesting note here. Now, Zach Moss continues to like play well. If you have him, you don't want to watch the games, but at the end of the games, he just ends up giving you 15, 16, 17 fantasy points. He just does okay in every aspect of the game, right? He has 51 on the ground, 4 for 27, catches a touchdown pass. Like I said, he's averaging more PPR fantasy points per game than Bijan Robinson is right now. He is, I believe, the running back 14 in fantasy. That being said, Chase Brown obviously had his best game of the season, 15 for 80 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He is clearly, when you watch them play, Chase Brown offers a level of explosion that Zach Moss is not even close to. Do I think there's ever going to be a complete flip? No, I don't. I think they trust Zach Moss a lot more in pass blocking, and I honestly think they trust him a little bit more in the down-to-down work. Chase Brown looked good and popped off some big plays. I will say, like, the Carolina run defense is really bad. They were without, obviously, Derek Brown, but without their next best defensive tackle as well. So they're down both of their D tackles in an already really, really bad defensive line. So again, not taking too much away from this in terms of the backfield, but yeah, Chase Brown becomes a lot more interesting now that we're seeing this backfield split up this way. And he got 2 of the goal line carries, which ended up being the touchdowns here, which you kind of need that for Zach Moss. He had chances. He just looks really slow on the goal line. And when he doesn't convert and they give it to Chase Brown, it becomes a little bit of an issue. So you saw the first 3 weeks here, Zach Moss, all the goal line carries, most of the goal line carries, all the goal line carries, and then drops off, and Chase Brown takes that inside the 5 attempt leadership there, okay? Long down and distance snaps, this was the first time that we saw this happen, where Zach Moss was long down and distance guy, 90%, 92%, 100%, and then all of a sudden Chase Brown kind of ate into that. So we saw a big shift in rushing attempts. Obviously, that was a little bit of like a hot hand approach. You just kind of hope if you're a Zach Moss owner, that doesn't become a long-term hot hand approach where, you know, they talked a lot in the offseason about it being a 1A, 1B, and it hadn't been up to this point. And we saw the first true like 1A, 1B game. But again, don't want to go like too crazy here given the matchup against Carolina and them being down in just defensive personnel here. And just one more reminder, again, all these numbers are on fantasylife.com. If you want to grab yourself a membership for a full year and you want to check out with code BDGE, that's going to get you 20% off an already really, really cheap membership on the site. Panther side of things, Dalton plays relatively well. Chuba has another huge game. You continue starting him as long as Jonathan Brooks is sidelined. Deontay Johnson, massive game again, 7 for 83 and a touchdown on 13 targets. He is a very, very rock-solid wide receiver too, if not better, in PPR leagues going forward. Leggett ended up being the right guy to own here. We were kind of going back and forth with that on the waiver wire show last week where we were looking at the numbers and it was like Mingo was running more routes, but we had kind of ultimately decided that like Leggett has a lot more upside. He's their first round pick. He's like the newer guy. He's got a lot more athleticism, I think, than Leggett does in terms of like functional athleticism. And he had the big game, 10 targets, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. So he is definitely someone we're looking to add off the waiver wire. Carolina's had 2 really, really good matchups. They play the Bears at Chicago next week. So it's going to be really hard to start Leggett next week. And Dalton, you're obviously still starting Deontay Johnson, but much tougher matchup next week in Chicago. Just a little reminder piece there. Texans hold off and beat the Jaguars 24-20. Jacksonville going to 0-4. Everything looks bad out here in Jacksonville. Can't really start T-Law. You can continue to start Brian Thomas, 9 targets, 6 catches, 86 yards, and gets the tug. Christian Kirk has back-to-back good games, so you love to see that. 12 targets here, so a huge target share, 7 for 61, also gets home into the end zone. I think both of them are high-end wide receiver 3s that you can pretty much start going forward every single week. The backfield gets really murky because we have Tank Bigsby, 7 for 90, rips off a 58-yard run. Travis Etienne, 11 for 50. He suffered a shoulder injury in this one, so he left the game, ended up coming back in. Can't really tell how much time he missed because of the injury and how much time he missed because Tank was just playing really well. We've also seen this before where, week 1, Tank outperformed Etienne and then nothing really stuck there. So Tank only played 30% of the snaps. It felt like when Etienne came out, he dropped down to 51% of the snaps on the day, but that was Dearness Johnson kind of picking up where he left off. You see the long down and distance snaps, Dearness Johnson became like the pass catcher in the offense. So really hard to get a read on like what's going to happen here because you're not expecting, a 58-yard, 60-yard run from Tank Bigsby every week. So you beg the question, like, what do we make here going forward? Etienne becomes a really, really difficult start in bad matchups. So I think he's usually like one play away from a huge game or a huge just outing and fantasy production game for you. But Etienne at this point, you're kind of looking at him as an RB3 flex play. Bigsby's underneath him, but obviously needs to be owned because if he goes down, Bigsby he's looked better than Etienne thus far. Maybe there's a flip here, but I don't see a world where they just start giving Tank more work than Etienne. On the flip side, Stroud, huge game. Nico is just looking like one of, if not the single best receiver in the fucking NFL right now. 12 for 50, 151 and a touchdown. Diggs, 5 for 69 in Tank Dell's absence. Also gets home with a rushing score. So really big game all around. I am so thankful. You know what? It ain't Thanksgiving, but I am so thankful I never have to fucking start Cam Akers again. Joe Mixon, just come back. Just come back. This is the problem. This is my problem. A lot of the times when you own players in fantasy, you watch the games and you have a conclusion about a player and you're so tapped in and dialed into what a player is doing that a lot of the time your instincts on those players is correct and you should follow those instincts. And we always like dive too deep into numbers and we try to like outsmart ourselves or outsmart whatever's going on. Like Cam Akers going into last week, I was like, cool, Mixon's out, Pierce is out. I don't think Akers is really that good. I don't think he's a good inside runner, but like the workhorse, he should have a workhorse role and should have so much volume that like he'll negate it. Ended up catching a lucky ass score on the goal line last week. And then this week, Mixon's out, Pierce is out. And I'm like, better matchup against Jaguars. But I knew that Akers is so bad. I knew that he looked terrible and he has no juice and no explosion and like he wasn't going to get home. And yet I started him again in my flex spot. When you have a read on a player in fantasy, when you own them, you're usually right, okay? Because you're tapped in so much more heavily and so much more, focused than other people are, and you'll get convinced out of your own fucking brain with all these bullshit numbers that you wrap yourself in. So that's my takeaway on Cam's stupid-ass Akers. Washington and Arizona. Jaden Daniels has been a man amongst little girls out there. I'm sure you guys have heard all the stats. Jaden Daniels is just ripping it up right now. Another one I'm just not going to dive too deep into in terms of like how high we're ranking all of the receivers and players on Washington because they are playing. Let me go back. Their schedule has been unbelievably easy. All right. They got their asses kicked by Tampa Bay. Outside of that, the Giants, the Bengals, the Cardinals, those are so bad. Those defenses are so bad. I would like to say Cleveland's defense is a lot better, but right now I don't know that that's true. Ravens in Baltimore will be a huge test. Really easy matchup against the Panthers, but then they get the Bears. Easy matchup against the Giants. Steelers, like, I'm gonna need to see a little bit of stabilization to make a strong case. Obviously, you're starting Jaden Daniels every week. Obviously, you're starting Brian Robinson every single week. But in terms of like what I believe this team to actually be, I don't have a full-scale conclusion yet because they've had quite easily the easiest stretch of guys to play against. With Austin Eckler out, Jeremy McNichols, that's a throwback. I feel like Jeremy McNichols came into the league 8 years ago and got a lot of hype and was like kind of like a fantasy darling because he's built like a workhorse running back, but he never panned out. And then he looked so good yesterday. That being said, I kind of think Austin Eckler is a really good buy low right now. I feel like he was playing really well prior to the injury, the concussion. And there's obviously a lot of work to go around in this backfield. And I think in better game scripts, Eckler is going to be really involved in the passing game. Obviously, again, Brian Robinson's performing like a high-end running back one right now. But I'm not going out there like trying to buy McNichols because I think Eckler will come back and play really well. In the receiving group, Terry McLaurin does get home again, which is good to see. Hard to really start anybody else in the offense, though. Arizona, again, man, this passing offense still looks really weird and off. Like they make plays sometimes, but there's still something clearly off about it. I'm not sure. I can't really put my finger on it. And this was kind of a weird game script because they got down early, big, right away, whatever, and still continue. Like in a game where they lost by 28 points, James Conner went 18 for 104 on the ground. So I don't know. Weird. Kyler Murray only attempted 22 passes, but yeah, something still feels off. Obviously, you're starting Marvin Harrison every week. We kind of got a dud game from Michael Wilson, even though he led the team in targets, was in a really good spot to produce with Trey McBride out. Hopefully, we get McBride back next week. But yeah, there's I'm not concerned, but you could just tell when you watch him. There's just something a little bit off about the passing game. I can't really put my finger on it. 49ers and Patriots. There was nothing off about the San Francisco 49ers yesterday as they routed the Pats 30-13. I will just say I was fucking right about Ramondre Stevenson. I knew my read going into the season was correct, and then he had a big game or two in the beginning, and everyone's like, nah, Stevenson and RB1, nah. This is what's going to fucking happen when you're playing as the Patriots against good teams. There's just no game script to be had there. Yeah, and you can't start Drake May behind that offensive line. He took 6 sacks yesterday, probably got hit. Let me see. How many QB hits? He had 10 hit. Yeah, you just can't subject Drake May to this. So no one in New England is startable at this point. Gibson ended up looking like he had a big receiving game, but he only did that because he busted off like a 50-yard reception at the end of the game, in garbage time. So nothing there. On the flip side, Jordan Mason gets home. Juwan Jennings had a relatively good game. Debo 3 for 58, first game back. Good to see them utilizing him a lot, though. So you feel good if you have Debo going forward. Like you feel like the calf is held up and strong. George Kittle ended up getting home 4 for 45 and a touchdown. He left and then came back, so I don't think any of the injuries that he sustained are overly concerning. I will say New England, with the already absolutely ruined fucking offensive line, also I believe lost. Was it David Andrews, their longtime or their starting center, probably their best offensive lineman. So that's another downgrade to that offensive line. So you start defenses against them. You start offenses against them because the time of possession is so juicy here. Ayuk, man, I don't really have any words of wisdom for you outside of anything that you can think of yourself. Like if you drafted Ayuk, you unfortunately just continue to roll him out there, even though I don't think he's hit double-digit PPR points yet this year. I am interested in seeing the wide receiver snap counts for the Niners to see what kind of play time Juwan Jennings got. All right, so he was relegated back to his role. Debo, good to see. He was right back to 83% of the routes. Ayuk is still up there at 90%. Juwan Jennings kind of drops down to his season average where he was at 56 in week 1, 69 in week 2, 90 last week, obviously, and then down to 67. I will say, one number that does stand out a little bit, 30% target per route run rate. Brock Purdy is targeting him on very valuable plays downfield where I kind of feel like that was Ayuk last year. It almost feels like he's gaining more trust with Juwan Jennings than he is with Ayuk. And can you fucking blame him given the types of plays that Juwan Jennings is making now week in and week out? It's going to be very hard to trust him, but in matchups where maybe we expect a shootout, maybe it's not, against the New England Patriots where Brock attempts, 27 passes. Like maybe when they're playing the Rams or maybe when they're playing the Seahawks, maybe they're playing in division against Arizona or whatever, Juwan Jennings could still be a good start if he continues to be like he led the team in targets here. He saw 6 targets. No one else saw more than 5. 3 for 88, 29.3 yards per reception. You see the ADOT just shooting up 15.2. Maybe he is the downfield playmaker that Ayuk was last year. And it doesn't feel fluky in terms of like being a good NFL receiver. Like he's making play after play after play. You have to think they continue to put him onto the field for 70% of the snaps. So I'm not leaving Juwan Jennings for dead by any means, even with this team at full strength. I think in shootouts he is certainly a viable flex play. I'm nervous about starting him going forward in games where it's like non-shootouts or San Fran has such a good game script, but like Juwan's not a dud with the team at full strength. Raiders-Browns. What can you say about the Browns that ain't been said already? Okay. They lose, I believe, another one of their offensive linemen. I think their center with their tackles are already out for this one. Deshaun Watson, sure, he holds on to the ball too long. He looks bad. But to be honest with you, dude, I don't know what else this man can do behind that offensive line. He is under pressure under every fucking play. Every drop back, there is defensive linemen in his face immediately. He also would have had a much bigger game. 2 things happened here. Amari Cooper, I don't know what that motherfucker's doing. He got he caught like an 80-yard touchdown pass. One of the better plays that Watson and Cooper have probably ever had together. That got called back from some bullshit holding call. That felt like Vegas actually stepped in for that one. I'm not one of those conspiracy theory guys, but it felt like Vegas stepped in on that fucking holding call. That should have been a touchdown. That was ridiculous. Obviously, everything looks a lot better. Cooper's 5 for 120 and a touchdown. Deshaun Watson's 250, 2 touchdowns. Cooper also had a ball just bounce right off his fucking chest, and that was the interception that Watson had. So his numbers look a million times better. This was obviously against a terrible Raiders defense that did not have Max Crosby. But I'm just saying, like, it ain't all Watson's fault. Like, his teammates are not helping him whatsoever. Outside of that, yeah, I think with the state of this offensive line, you cannot start really, like, okay, Ford got home because he caught 7 fucking passes, but in a matchup where they're playing against a real defense, which is not next week because it's the Commanders, so I guess you can start him again, but you get what I'm saying. Like, the state of this offensive line, it's going to be very hard to trust anybody in this offense. Hopefully they get David Njoku back soon. On the flip side, Minshew's been playing really poorly. I still, like, I can't endorse Aiden O'Connell. Even Gardner Minshew at his lowest is not as bad as Aiden O'Connell. So I hope they don't make a QB change. They won the game, so hopefully they don't. Madison, 5 for 60. It feels like the Tank Bigsby situation. It feels like all the handcuff situations where it's like he's playing so much better, he should get more work, but it's just like they're not going to do it. Zamir White, 17 for 50 on the ground. As a team, they look good, mostly because you have DJ Turner, 18 yards on a carry, Brock Bowers, 12. Like, the yards per carry are getting bumped up by these big plays by, like, non-Zamir White players. But 29 for 152 and 2 touchdowns on the ground, that is what Antonio Pierce would like to do, especially in a game where Devontae Adams is out. Trey Tucker, I guess, kind of needs to be taken a little bit more seriously if Devontae Adams' hamstring turns into – he had like a late week practice hamstring tweak, and it doesn't seem serious, but the problem is it wasn't serious for A.J. Brown. Next thing you know, he's out for a fucking month. It wasn't serious for T. Higgins. Next thing you know, he's out for a few weeks. Like, if this turns into a problem for Devontae Adams, like, Trey Tucker, I think, should be owned. 5 for 41, second on the team in targets, ended up, being used as a rusher on the goal line, scores on a 3-yard touchdown run. So, you could do worse than Trey Tucker, I think. Let's move to the Chiefs and the Bills, and, man, I really, really, really feel for Rashee Rice owners, man. You guys, like, was probably the pick of the draft. If you grab Rashee Rice, even up to round 3. I don't think anyone needed to draft him in round 3 up to the point of the summer where drafts were happening. But a lot of you guys got him around 4, 5, 6, and he really was like the pick of the draft, probably, at least wide receiver position where the values were up to this point. Seems like he tore his ACL. I don't think we have a full read on it, but from what I know, the rate at which you're like certain of an ACL tear on the field, or at least in the locker room afterwards, is around a 95% certainty for teams. So for them to come out and kind of hint at that being what it was, plus all the, I guess, like research and content I've consumed since then on what it probably is, it's probably an ACL tear. Hopefully it didn't involve, the PCL, MCL, so it's not a crazy recovery for Rice, but looks like we're going to be without Rice for the remainder of the season, unfortunately. What that means for the rest of the receiving group, it feels like this team is going to revert to kind of what it was last year, in the sense that it's just not a great offensive output team. Now, there's a lot of moving pieces here. Travis Kelce obviously shoots back up to a must-start tight end, because Rashee Rice was pretty much taking all the targets that Kelce was getting last year, and as he should have, because Rice looks so explosive, was getting off the line of scrimmage so well, was making so many plays after the catch that you just are probably not going to get from Kelce. But Kelce's now going to get targeted at an insane rate because Rice had the chemistry with Mahomes, and now Kelce's kind of the only guy that does. So Kelce becomes – those of y'all that drafted Kelce kind of got bailed out here because it looked like he was, trajectory 0, and now he's probably back to being the guy attached to Patrick Mahomes. In the receiving group, like I think it's pretty clear up to this point that Xavier Worthy's not a 1. He's not a possession receiver. He's not a wide receiver 1 in an offense. However, we did see the thing that they drafted him to be yesterday on that deep play where he connected for a 54-yard touchdown. It was a beautiful play. It was a beautiful thing to watch. But still, Worthy is I'm I don't want to say a one-trick pony, but it's either like a line of scrimmage screenplay, an end around, or a deep shot downfield. Hard to trust him. That being said, like Rashee Rice was getting, 10, 12, 15 targets a game. They have to go somewhere, okay? So you're probably starting Worthy going forward, but he is a very low floor, high ceiling player. We look at the rest of the receivers out there in Kansas City. It is so fucking bleak, man. Xavier Worthy's, I feel like, the only player under like 30 years old they have at the receiver position. Justin Watson bumped up to 74% of the routes. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't really change at all. He kind of stayed the same. Mecole Hardman up to 21% of the routes. So it feels like Watson's probably the most reliable here from an outsider perspective. But I could also see Juju getting more play time going forward. The dude ran 53% of the routes, couldn't fucking earn a single target. He is so cooked. I can't believe I just suggested Juju. But we do have a sample size of Juju producing for Mahomes and KC 2 years ago when he led the team in receiving, or led the receivers in receiving yards. So you could sprinkle some fab on Juju, I think, and just kind of see how it plays itself out. Watson, again, is not a dude that's ever going to get, big, consistent targets week over week. So I think this might just come down to a situation where if we kind of parlay this into the backfield, Carson Steele fumbled really early on and then pretty much got benched after that. Kareem Hunt's first game, 14 for 69, 4.9 yards per carry, caught 2 passes for 16 yards. I think as much as we're going to try to force this into being like, the top receiver in KC has to be a stud, the top running back in KC has to be a stud. The fact of the matter is their offense is not in a good state right now. And I almost feel like there are probably going to be more games where they win scoring 20 points than they win scoring 30 or 35 points, which doesn't always lead to big fantasy outings. So sure, you based on what happened yesterday, you want to own Hunt over any of the other running backs, but you also saw Samaje Perine get the goal line carry. You also saw, the pass catching work split up between all these receivers and all these weapons. So it's a really tough situation to kind of deal with. I'd say the only takeaways are like, huge boost for Kelsey, boost for Hunt, downgrade for Carson Steele, minor boost for Xavier Worthy. I think just naturally has to see more targets and play a bigger role in this offense. Noah Gray, maybe he plays a little bit more. He looks pretty spry out there, but like how many 2 tight end sets are they really going to run? Watson, minor boost. Sky Moore's might be the woat. I'm not overly excited about anyone that's not already owned in this offense. I'll say that. On the flip side, Herbert, playing really banged up. Dobbins couldn't get home against, and obviously a tough defense in Kansas City. Ladd McConkey is looking like, in every week, wide receiver 3 in PPR. He is getting an insane amount of targets. He continues to lead the team in targets. 7 targets on 27 attempts. So you're talking about like a 27% target share, and that's kind of like right on base with what he's had all year. Obviously, they're not downfield targets, but he also turned one into a 37-yard play, 5 for 67 and a touchdown. Like if he's going to get red zone targets, if he's going to get plays where he's getting the ball in space and he can make plays because he's really shifty with the ball, those are going to end up being big fantasy days. So Ladd feels like his stock is definitely on the ups. Let's move to the game of the evening. Sunday Night Football, the Baltimore Ravens, and more particularly Derrick Henry just went fucking bonkers. First run of the game, 87 yards to the cribbo. He ended up with 24 carries, 199 yards, and a touchdown. Also caught a little score there. You didn't think he was going to get involved on the goal line in the receiving game, but he did. So he ends up with a monster fantasy day. And if you drafted Derrick Henry where he was going around, the third round, whatever, like you're feeling pretty fucking good about this one. Lamar Jackson only had to throw it 18 times, but he scores twice through the air as well as once through the ground. So another massive fantasy day for Lamar. He is just returning value on top of value. Man, the receiving game, though. Dud for Flowers, dud for Bateman, dud for Likely. Andrews with another fucking goose egg. Here's the thing. They're going to keep coming out and say, like, our game plan was to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. Problem is, like, that's going to be their game plan every week, it feels like. So it's going to be so hard to trust any pass catcher really here. Justice Hill, 6 for 78, kind of crazy, but he's an extremely low floor player, so I'm not picking him up or starting him anywhere. On the flip side, just a bad game for the Bills. Not much to take away here. You're never going to sit any of these players. Khalil Shakir continues to look, really good. Good to see Dalton Kincaid lead the team in targets, I guess, 5 for 47, so a usable PPR day, but just a down game for all parties involved here. What else do we got? I think that's it. I think that's it for the games for this week. What else we got going on here? What's going on in the comments section? I got to stop doing that. I just got to stop doing that. Where is the comments? Why can I not see them? There we are. How you doing? Okay. We are about 422 comments behind. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave you with that. I will leave you with that game-by-game recap. As always, I do this every Monday, as I said. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the notification button because we go live, obviously, so you got to get notified when we get on there. Is Tucker Craft an ad? Fuck yes. He is an incredible ad this week. Tomorrow, we'll have our waiver wire video out in more depth, which I will talk about Tucker Craft, so make sure you're subscribed for that. And as always, go download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use code BDGE when you get on there. All right, Underdog Fantasy will get you a free square. Fantasy Life for the utilization report, the best resource out there. Code BG, 20% off. And then pick it. Free app. Download. Free. All right, how many times can I say it? It is free. Track your bets. Track my bets. Underdog. Pickett, Fantasy Life, code BDG when you get on them hoes. I love y'all, and I'll see you tomorrow. Smoochies.